Hi, you're watching SportsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and today we talk about South Africa versus India. And South Africa come down to India to play 3 T20s and 3 tests starting the 15th of September, which is Sunday. And after South Africa's debacle and mortifying performance in the recently concluded World Cup, the onus is perhaps on newly anointed captain of the shortest format of the game, Quinton de Kock, to replicate their exploits from the 2015 tour of India, where they won the T20 as well as the one-day international series. But there is just one little problem with the Proteas team. They are hugely inexperienced against a dominant India and will look to a handful or perhaps just a couple of players to take them across the finishing line. But the same inexperience can also turn out to be a blessing in disguise for the team, as they may catch the Indian players off guard. Let's talk about how the series will give us a glimpse into the imminent World Cup, T20 World Cup, which is slated to be played next year, with our guest on the panel. And first up, it's my buddy and sports commentator and expert, Radhakrishnan Srinivasan, RK, who's joining us on the broadcast. RK, let's talk about South Africa coming on to India and starting with this T20 series. There are a few areas. We'll talk about India first. There are a few areas that we have to look towards India when it comes to actually clinching this series. And first up, there's not going to be any Dhoni. There's no Bumrah. There's no Bhuvi. But you still have KL Rahul, you have Shikhar Dhawan, you have Rohit Sharma, you have Virat Kohli. So there is opportunity for a lot of players to make their mark. Even guys like Chahar and Navdeep Saini, they could perhaps use this as a good opportunity to, sort of cement their place in the T20 side, because the World Cup is also going to be played next year. What is your overall assessment of South Africa coming to India and how this is going to be panning out, after these 3 matches have been concluded?
So much first of Vineet for having me. Yes, as you rightly said, India, quite a few players have got an opportunity to perhaps take their claims into that 11 of Team India going forward to the World Cup. And I think it's not a bad place to start up against South Africa, one of the tougher teams. I think it's important to realize that while India has very, very well in the test format and in the ODI format, South Africa is ahead of India as far as the T20 rankings are concerned. So there is some work to do as far as Virat Kohli is concerned. And it's not a bad place to start, as I said. The reason why I say that is, obviously, we are looking ahead to the World Cup, which is due to happen down under. And also the first of those games in the World Cup for Team India is, in fact, against South Africa. And it is going to be played in Perth. And therefore, in terms of in terms of starting your preparations, this is not a bad place to start at all. And as far as the South African side is concerned, look, there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is you can look back at the 2015 side, which came here late in 2015. As you rightly pointed out, they won the T20s. I distinctly remember the 2 T20s that they played. One was chasing down almost 200 runs in Dharamshala, which is exactly the venue of the first of those T20s this time. And the other one in Cuttack, when India was shot out for less than 100, and they made sure that they went over the line fairly easily. You can look at that side and say there is no A.B. de Villiers, there is no experience. But again, I think as far as South Africa this time is concerned, they are beginning with a clean slate. I think we are looking at the T20 squad, we are looking at the Test squad and saying there's not much of an overlap, and that need not be a bad thing. I think you've got a couple of batsmen in Quinton de Kock and Babuma who form a part of the Test squad as well as the T20 squad. And then you look at Rabada and Nortje, who form a part of the Test squad and the T20 squad. Otherwise, they have completely separated things in South Africa. I think it's also important when you talk about South Africa to understand what happened at the backdrop of the World Cup. The structure is completely changed. You're going to have, or you are actually having a director of cricket, and then you're having a manager to whom the support staff directly go ahead and report. So there are so many things that have happened behind the scenes. And in a sense, I would want to believe that Quinton de Kock has been given the reins and he's been told, look, go ahead and express yourself. At the end of the day, as you rightly pointed out, Quinton de Kock has tremendous amount of experience. He knows what it is to play in India. So I expect a good series, because you still look at the squad and say, hang on, that's not a bad bowling unit at all by any stretch of imagination. You might not have the likes of Dale Steyn, but you still have the likes of Rabada, who would be itching to go there and prove a point or two, because let's not forget the focus in recent times has been increasingly about Jasprit Bumrah, has been about Jofra Archer. So many things have happened. So there is that individual motivation, and as a team, they have not lost a T20 in India. I know they've only played 2 games. Late October in 2015, they have not lost a game of T20. So you might call it a fairly inexperienced side, and I buy that point to a certain extent, but it is by no means going to be an easy series.
Right. In fact, interesting that you mentioned Rabada, that he's going to be a key figure when it comes to troubling the Indian batsmen. We must remember that since 2016, he's only played 4 T20 internationals. I'm not counting the IPL, other T20 tournaments that Rabada is a part of. Let's talk about the gulf between the experiences of these two teams, Arcade. Nevertheless, it is, a bona fide fact that South Africa do beat us when it comes to rankings. But if you add up the number of T20 matches which have been played by the South African side, it amounts to 210. But when you add up how many T20 internationals have Virat Kohli, Shikhar Dhawan and Rohit Sharma have played, it adds up to 219. So the gulf of experience between these two teams is immense, and South Africa have a lot of catching up to do, and there could be players that India is perhaps untested with. There could be, in fact, guys in that team that we are not sure about how to deal with that could topple the boat for us, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about the experience of both the sides, because when I looked at the players that represented India, the playing 11 in 2015, when South Africa came down to India and played that a couple of T20s, it's fascinating because the names that you mentioned, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Shikhar Dhawan, all were a part of that playing 11. So in terms of consistency, as far as the top order is concerned, you have that consistency till date. So which is a good sign. It is only in the bowling department that India has undergone changes. For example, you look at, say, an Ashwin, who was a part of that 11 in 2015 to the end of 2015. He's no more a part of the T20 setup. At least it appears for the moment. He's definitely not a part of the squad. I remember one of the games where the tosser for Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who was captaining that particular side at that point in time, saying whether it's going to be an Amit Mishra, who was in contention, who was a part of the squad. So he's not a part of the squad this time around, definitely, because then it was a toss-up between Amit Mishra and Akshar Patel. Akshar Patel was picked up, and then he was carted for about 22 runs and over. I distinctly remember that game, and the game went in favor of the South Africans. JP Duminy played a blinder. ABD Williams had a very good game that time around as well. So in terms of the bowling department, India, look, you're looking at what? Deepak Chahar. You're looking at Navdeep Saini. You're looking at Khalil Ahmed. So the selectors are very, very clearly saying that we know we've got Jasprit Bumrah. We know we've got Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, who are definitely fantastic, and you would expect them to start regularly more often than not. But here is an opportunity, as you rightly said at the top of the show, for a few of them to stake their claims going forward. Deepak Chahar has done very well for Chennai Super Kings in the IPL. We know that. But again, when you measure the performances of an IPL, you need to take into consideration the wickets and the surfaces that different teams play in, and also the brand of cricket that different teams adopt. So in that sense, I think Deepak Chahar, though has performed well, would want to see him more often than not in the India colours. Khalil Ahmed gives you an interesting option, him being a left-arm seamer, that's always helpful. And Navdeep Saini was hugely impressive. We saw what he could do in the West Indies. He's got that pace, he's got that nip, and when you're looking at the tracks on which we are playing, Vineet, it is fantastic. You're starting off with Dharamshala, you're going to play in Mohali, so good surfaces where the ball will come onto the bat, a bit of zip as well. You're talking about September. I'm sitting here in Mumbai, so I do not know the weather conditions in Delhi, but if it is going to get cooler, which it does, closing in on October, it's going to add a bit more zing to it. And then, of course, we move on to Bangalore. So, as you rightly said, there's plenty to look forward to as far as the Indian bowling department is concerned. Let's not forget, Hardik Pandya is back in the mix. So
absolutely,
if I were to put down an 11 today, definitely Hardik will be a part of that mix.
Absolutely. We're also joined by former India cricketer Deep Das Gupta on the show. Deep, we're talking about an overall assessment of, this T20 series, which is going to be played between India and South Africa. South Africa definitely coming in with a lot of disadvantage. They did have a very dismal, a despondent, a discouraging World Cup. Otis Gibson, we all know what happened to him. And the way they were relegated in the World Cup, that's a different story. But they have to recover from that. But the fact of the matter is that Quinton de Kock is an inexperienced captain. He has a lot of youngsters to in fact educate and motivate at the same time. How do you see this particular series for the South Africans? Now, they've had tasted victories in the past in India before, but India, the way they have been cruising and the way they have been dominant in the last few years, the last few months, it's a different matter altogether. That when it comes to rankings, South Africa is high up, but India is a different animal when you play in India.
Start off with, everything is kind of a dress rehearsal or preparation for the World Cup. So every team is trying out different combinations and permutations. So is South Africa. Obviously, there's a lot of things which have changed in South Africa in cricket. Not just the captain, that's the least of their issues. The coach has changed, the whole system has changed. They're looking at more of a football kind of a setup where you have a manager, not really coaches, but a manager who manages the team. And then you have specialist coaches under the manager. So obviously there are some structural changes in cricket in South Africa. Having said that, again, if you look at that side, it's not a young side. I was looking at the players. It's not a young side, but it's an inexperienced side. Obviously, they are kind of trying to look at different options that they have going into the World Cup. So is India. How I see it is, obviously India are from favorites to win it, but having said that, T20 you never know, especially the fact that, what Archie was mentioning as well, the venue. Dharamshala should be in high scoring, Mohali should be in high scoring. So on the venue, all the three venues are pretty high scoring, where I believe their inexperienced batsmen and kind of out of form batsmen might find it comparatively easier. I also think South Africa is a bowling heavy side. I would look at them and say, listen, if I have to call them better suit or the stronger suit, that would be their bowling. Batting also is nullified to a certain extent, the lack of performances of late because of the venue. And also, quite a few of them were playing in India, the India A series. I think 6 or 7 of them, including Visa Hendricks, Buren Hendricks, Bahuma, Temba Bahuma. So 6, 7 of them were here in India playing a 5-day, 50-over tournament. So they played 4 matches, if I'm not wrong. One was washed out. So yeah, it should be an interesting contest overall.
Right, Deep, there's also a tinge of melancholy for a lot of fans who are used to seeing the South African side in a certain way. There is no A.B. de Villiers, there is no Hashim Amla, there is no Dale Steyn, but he's injured, and there is no Imran Tahir as well. He was somebody who in fact was a delight for all T20 fans. There is Tabraiz, who perhaps has to fill a lot of big shoes. How is the absence or, the vacuum that has been left by these giants in South African team be filled? And will this, India series be an opportunity for some of these youngsters to actually make a mark for themselves?
Well, as far as South Africa is concerned, it's quite important to fill in those shoes, especially when you're talking about Dale Steyn and A.B. de Villiers. It's very, very difficult. Yes, they are struggling a bit. If you look at the squad, there are not too many people with a lot of with experience, so to say, apart from a few of them. But you know what, they are a good side. They've been doing all right. And they might surprise us well because they have a lot of boundaries. They have a lot of strings which is attached to their side. We know about their policies and everything else. It's not as easy. It's not easy being either a South African selector, coach, administrator, or players for that matter. But yeah, we just hope that there are youngsters coming through, good youngsters coming through. To name a few, obviously you have someone like Bio, you have Vander Duchesne. I really, really like him. During the World Cup, also, he was extremely consistent. He's been very consistent in international cricket. Then you have Lynn, who replaced the previous Mark Steven all-rounder, predominant left-arm spinner. They have talent in there. It's just that, they don't have the experience. Hopefully, they will unearth a few of those players here. But yeah, you can't replace those big names that you mentioned. As far as India is concerned, again, as RK mentioned, I think he was spot on in terms of you always have the tried and tested players like Bumrah, Bhuvi and everything else. So you might as well try a few more options because if you remember, before the 50-over World Cup, we struggled to find a fourth seamer. You know, we were looking at Hardik as a fourth, but as far as the other out and out fourth seamer, we struggled because we had Bhuvi, Bumrah, and who else did we have actually? Yeah, and so this is still a struggle in terms of white ball cricket. We're still trying to find a Nafees Sani is a good addition to it. Khalil is a good addition to it. So I think it's a great opportunity. Also, they did well against West Indies. I mean, how can you drop someone like a Nafees who did well? How can you drop someone like Deepak who did well? So obviously, these guys needed to be picked in this side, and another great opportunity for them.
Right, RK, you know, Deep spoke about Van der Bussen, and there are a couple of more guys who, in fact, will be really crucial in, you know, helping out South Africa, you know, in hostile, you know, situations in India. You know, Van der Bussen is one. You have Anrich Nortje, who's also made a mark, but Quinton de Kock and Miller are the other two guys who really are, you know, going to be the anchors for this team when it comes to T20 cricket. Now, however Miller may be popular, you know, in the IPL, he hasn't played a full season, even for his own team. In the last 4 seasons, he hasn't played a full season in the last 4 years for his team. So his form and his performance is definitely going to be pivotal and a sort of precedent for a lot of youngsters who are looking for inspirations in the absence of a lot of star power which used to exist in the South African team.
I'm sure when you look at his performances, you would have expected more from him. There are no two ways about it, because if I just close my eyes and think about David Miller, I can almost imagine him hitting 1 6 after another over that mid-wicket area. That is his strength. And when you look at games that he's played even in India, you would have thought that the ball coming onto the bat, he would have released a few of those opportunities. But unfortunately, that happened more often than not. So, yeah, I can understand that. And I think David Miller will be one of the key players in the sense that he's had that experience of having played in India more often than not, and therefore to bind that team together, you need players like that. I think Deep was quite rightly speaking about Van der Dussen. For all the talk about South Africa, perhaps obviously not doing well as far as the World Cup is concerned, he was that one bright spark for South Africa. Maybe up the order, he could have been a lot better. Let's not take anything away from somebody like Reza Hendricks, for example. Remember, Reza Hendricks could have gone for that World Cup, but I think towards the very end, the selectors decided the experience of Hashim Amla in England would help them a lot more than Reza Hendricks' career. So that's one of the reasons why Reza Hendricks did not go across to England. So let's not take anything away from Reza Hendricks. Pretorius is somebody that excites me because I've seen him. And obviously, going back to somebody like Bavuma, initially when he came onto the international side, I know even now there are people who are saying, and quite rightly so, that he hasn't justified his talent because he's a fantastic player. He started off playing a lot of test match cricket, and off late, if you look at his domestic T20 numbers in South Africa, that makes for some good reading. He's gotten across to Northamptonshire. He's had a county stint out there, so he's scored a couple of useful knocks out there. So I know we talk about inexperience, but there are players that excite us and excite me in particular. I buy your point that you do not have the likes of A.B. de Villiers, who is definitely a crowd puller wherever he goes across the world. I understand there is no Imran Tahir, but hey, while they might not be the youngest at this point in time, when you look at the likes of Miller, or even when you look at the likes of Bavuma, but there is some excitement the likes of Van der Dussen can generate going forward out of this setup of South Africa.
Right, Deep, in fact, you wanted to make a point, and then I'll ask you the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, listen, what I think will make a huge difference are also the pitches and the venues. As Arthur mentioned initially, the venues are very, very good for batting. That's where someone like David Miller will enjoy batting. If you look at his career in India, in the IPL, every time they played on a pitch where the ball is turning and stopping up straight, we struggle. If the ball comes onto the bat, I mean, that's not just for him. For most of the overseas, outside the subcontinent batsmen, I think the venues will make a difference because how I feel most of the venues are pretty high scoring. So that will kind of balance out the field.
Right, Deep, and let's also talk about the Indian team now. There is some baggage which has been carried on for quite some time. I know Rohit Sharma is going to pick himself up, but the toss-up perhaps might happen between Shikhar Dhawan and KL Rahul. Though KL Rahul, has a better average and a strike rate than Shikhar Dhawan. But hey, a left-hander is always welcome in the side, isn't it?
It is true. I mean, if you go sheerly by numbers, then obviously KL Rahul is averaging over 40, strike rate is 140. Both of them are better than Shikhar, and obviously looking at last 6 months, and Shikhar's been pretty hot and cold. But again, if you look at Shikhar and Rohit as a pair, I mean, they've been very, very successful. They know each other very well. They bounce up each other, and I think that makes a bit of a difference. Yes, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be an extremely tough one because, as you mentioned, the numbers and the performances, if you go by them of late, would favor someone like KL Rahul. But if you just go by what you mentioned, the left-right combination and traditionally the Rohit-Shikhar combination, it's going to be a tough one.
Right, absolutely. We'll also be joined by Fahras Patel, who's a South African journalist, who's going to give us, a better insight into how the South African team is going to be faring, but he will be joining us very shortly. But let me go back to RK. In fact, RK, it is important to understand that Hardik Pandya is also going to be making a comeback, and Shreyas Iyer is also somebody who would perhaps take this opportunity to make the best in the absence of certain stalwarts in this particular series. In fact, we don't have RK right now. Deep, let me bounce off that question to you.
Listen, as you said, yes, it's going to be a big opportunity for not just Shreyas, because you know what, if you look at the last season, the series, it seems to me that they're looking at Shreyas as predominantly 50 overs in the middle order, and they're looking at someone like Manish Pandey in the T20, because Manish has done well. He's done well against South Africa, in fact, in the A series which is going on right now. So there is a possibility that they might go with Manish Pandey in the T20 format as of now. But yeah, obviously Shreyas is the future. How I see Shreyas is your middle order future white ball cricket, and even red ball for that matter. So it's a big series for all these youngsters and someone like Shikhar, I believe, because if Shikhar is not picked in the playing 11, then it's going to be pretty difficult for them to make a comeback.
All right, Deep, I earlier spoke of some baggage which is being carried on, and that always the buck of that baggage usually stops at number 4. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Pant? Who's it going to be? Because this is a conundrum. This is like a round of musical chairs that nobody seems to win for a very long time.
Listen, how I see it is it's a self-created crisis, right? You had your whoever you play at number 4, give them enough opportunities. I mean, that's something that the team management hasn't done in the last 2-3 years. Last series, it was Rishabh. I would still believe someone like Rishabh is predominantly a number 5, number 6 batsman in both the shorter formats, 20 and 50. I would rather see someone like either Manish Pandey or Shreyas as number 4. I think Shreyas is kind of making that number 4 position his own in 50-over format. Maybe it's about time to actually look at him also in the T20 format. So, because he's done it before. He's done it last year for his IPL side, so he's batting top of the order. And he has all those gears. He can change his game according to the situation if required. If there are early wickets, he can handle that. If he has to go hard at the bowler, he can do that. He's got all the gears. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him on number 4.
Right, Deep, and there's an opportunity for a few bowlers as well. Chahar and Navdeep Saini. There is not Bumrah. There is no Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Khalil Ahmed, the only left-hander, who could possibly make a difference in the way this series is going to pan out. So a big opportunity for these youngsters as well.
Absolutely, no two ways. As I was mentioning, and I forgot it was Sham, the first teamer. Because if you look at white ball cricket, I mean, you are still looking for your 4th teaming option. As I mentioned, you have Bhumi, you have Bhuvneshwar, you have Shami. Who's your 4th? And especially in T20 cricket, I don't see Shami playing too much of T20 cricket, international cricket. So it boils down to Bhumi and Bhuvneshwar. So where is the 3rd and 4th bowler? That's where I think Khalil, because he's a left-arm seamer, obviously brings a different dimension to the bowling attack. obviously it's very, very important because there aren't too many left-hand spinners in the circuit either. You have Aniket Chaudhary, apart from him, so there are not too many options. It's very important, not just for Khalil, but also for the Indian team, that someone like Khalil does come good. And then Navdeep Saini, yes, I think I still believe Navdeep Saini is a predominantly a red ball bowler. That's his forte, but obviously he's young and he's keen to learn, or he will make that transition, and so he should be a good counter bowler as well, getting some experience.
Right, Deep. We're also joined by Mr. Faraz Patel, who's a South African journalist. Faraz, appreciate you joining us. South Africa is in India, but there are a lot of questions, a lot of worries when it comes to the South African team coming down in India. First of all, they have to get over the ghosts which they have recently been possessed by pertaining to the World Cup, where they were ousted in the most unceremonious fashion. And plus, on the other hand, you have a dominant team like India with guys like Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, Shikhar Dhawan, KL Rahul. What kind of a mold do you see this new South African team in? Because remember, there are a lot of stalwarts, there are a lot of big players who are absent from this team.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. You have Dale Steyn retired also. Now, Dale Steyn will be available for the ODI series, but there are no ODI series that are going to be played in India. So obviously it's a huge challenge for South Africa. Remember that they've changed their sort of management style. They now have a director of cricket in Enoch Nkwe. Now, Enoch Nkwe was very successful with the local based Lions, winning a number of trophies with them. So he's going to be now, of course, taking the national team only on an interim basis. And I think Cricket South Africa, what their aim is to look at Enoch Nkwe and how he's going to perform in India and decide whether to give him that full-time position. Of course, they have a number of new faces. Lance Clues now, I know he's loved a lot in India. He's going to be taking charge of the batting with regards to South Africa in the T20 series. So a number of changes. Of course, Faf du Plessis, he's still in charge. Of course, for the test team, Quentin de Kock, he's going to be taking over from the T20 side, captaining the T20 side. So the same names are there, the likes of Lungi Ngidi, Kagiso Rabada. But of course, the stalwarts have gone. And again, this is going to be a huge challenge for South Africa, especially in a country like India, where they have struggled. Do remember they lost the test series there 3-0, where they absolutely struggled against spin. Of course, they struggled against Ravindra Jadeja and of course Ravichandran Ashwin, who were stars in that series. So South Africa are going to need to go ahead and get themselves into the mold of playing in those conditions of spin, and also at the same time have a weapon with themselves with regards to spin bowling.
For us, we are inching towards the end of this particular conversation. Deep, you wanted to make a point.
Like Amol, who helped him out, Amol Mazumdar, who helped him out, the consultant in terms of batting. But the other important thing I just want to mention was, I think Quinton de Kock was very smart in his very first interview before this series. He mentioned, we are ready for the world. So what that has done is taken the pressure off the others, the team, in terms of, it's all right to fail. Once you send that, then there are no baggages, as you mentioned, as far as South Africa is concerned, because they are ready for it. So they are kind of clear. I think that was a good statement to make. I know a lot of people are making, they aren't ready or whatever, but I think for a young side and a young captain to say that and say, what, don't forget it. Forget all that baggage and everything else. It's all right if you fail. Just go out there, express yourself.
Absolutely. Go out there, express yourself, play your natural game, and don't worry about the consequences. I wish the South Africans could also think this way. But on that note, we will have to end this particular show. Deep, Faraz and RK, thank you so much for being a part of this lovely debate. Well, folks, that's all we have on SportsX today. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Thank you.